She stepped out of the dust with a baby in one arm and a six-shooter in the other. No wedding ring, no badge, no name. When the sheriff asked who the child belonged to, she said, "Not mine," and smiled like a secret. Folks in Grady Hollow didn't much like mysteries. They liked their whiskey neat, their cattle branded, and their stories told straight. That morning, when the woman showed up just past sunup, something shifted in the air, like the sky itself was holding its breath. She wasn't no prairie flower. Her boots were too clean for someone who'd been traveling, her eyes too sharp. The baby, swaddled tight in a blue wool blanket with initials stitched in gold thread, JT. She rode into town without a saddlebag, without a coat, without even dust on her hem, just a baby asleep on her chest. That pistol tucked like a promise at her side. Sheriff Landry was first to greet her. He had that kind of patience that only comes from burying a wife and surviving 2 wars. He didn't flinch when she said the baby wasn't hers. "Whose is it then?" he asked, not unkind. She paused, ran her fingers gently over the infant's cheek and said, "That depends on who's asking, Sheriff. Now a reply like that'll either get you shot or married out here." But she got neither, just silence. The kind that makes men sit up straighter and women peek through curtains. Landry didn't press, just motioned for her to follow. Led her to the boarding house and told Miss Edna to find her a room. He figured she'd stay a night or 2, maybe long enough to feed the baby and move on. But 3 weeks later she was still there, still with the baby, still claiming it wasn't hers, and still sleeping with that gun beneath her pillow. I watched her from the porch of my father's mercantile. The way she moved, not like a ranch wife nor a saloon girl. No, she moved like a dancer with secrets stitched into every step. And once, just once, I saw her late at night behind the stables whispering to that baby in Spanish, then kissing its forehead like it hurt her to do it. Thing is, that baby wasn't the only mystery, because 2 days after she arrived, a man was found dead out by the canyon, shot through the chest, and the bullet matched the caliber of the pistol she kept so close. Now folks in town whispered she was a bounty hunter, or a spy, or worse, a woman running from her past, with a child that wasn't hers, and a body she never buried. But I knew different. I saw the way her hands trembled when the baby cried, not from fear, from something deeper, like grief or guilt. And every time someone asked her name, she gave a different one. Lila, Rosa, Kate, once even Mary. But I knew she was none of those. And the night the preacher's dog wouldn't stop barking outside her door, I saw her silhouette in the window, holding that baby tight and aiming the gun toward the door like she was waiting on someone she knew would come. And sure enough, someone did. But that's not the twist. The twist came when the man who showed up claimed to be the baby's father, and swore had buried the real mother weeks ago, with 2 bullets in her chest. He came in on a black gelding with blood on his sleeve, and dust crusted in the corners of his eyes. Said his name was Clay Mercer, a name that meant little to us, but carried weight somewhere, I reckon. He wore no badge, wore no grief either, not on the surface, just a gun low on his hip, and a look like he lost something that never wanted to be found. "I'm here for my son," he said to Sheriff Landry, "and the woman who stole him." You'd think a claim like that would cause a stir, but in Grady Hollow accusations were as common as cow pies. Most didn't hold. But Landry, he went quiet, too quiet. His knuckles whitened on the coffee cup he held, and he motioned toward the boarding house like he already knew the devil was knocking. The woman, whoever she truly was sitting by the window when Clay barged in, baby on her lap, eyes calm, like she'd been expecting him since the day she was born. "Put the boy down," he growled. But she didn't. She stroked the child, his hair with one hand, and kept the other resting gentle on that pearl-handled revolver, like it was part of her skin. "This ain't your fight, Clay," she said softly, not scared, not surprised. "Like hell it ain't. That's my blood you're holding?" She looked down at the baby, then back at him. "You sure?" He flinched, just barely, but it was enough. "I buried Maria myself," he hissed. "You think I wouldn't recognize her child?" She didn't blink, just stood and walked toward him slow, baby still in her arms, until they were nearly chest to chest. "And what did you bury her with, Clay?" she whispered. "Guilt? Or bullets?" He didn't answer. His fingers twitched near his holster, but he didn't draw. Something about her, something haunted, held him still. That's when Landry stepped in, hand on his own pistol. "If there's truth here," he said, "we'll sort it with blood tests and birth records. But out here, paper didn't mean much. Out here, a name could be borrowed. A story rewritten with a steady hand and a good lie. What mattered was who drew first, and who stood last." Clay spat on the floor and turned. "You've got 3 days," he said over his shoulder. "Then I come back for him, and I want knocked twice." And just like that he was gone. But he left something behind. Something no one could see but her. A tremor in her step, a shadow across her face. That night I saw her bury something behind the barn. Not with a shovel, but with her bare hands. I never asked what it was. Some things out here are better left covered. But I remember the way she cried afterward, silently, fiercely, like each tear was a confession. And I started to wonder, maybe the baby wasn't hers, maybe the gun wasn't either. But the guilt, that belonged to her. In the past, it was riding back into town. The next morning rain came, not the soft kind that soaks the earth and brings the smell of lavender and dust. No, this was a hard, punishing rain. The kind that scrubs secrets out of the cracks and forces folk to stay inside and listen to what? Hiding beneath the silence? She didn't leave her room. Miss Edna said she didn't. Ted even come down for breakfast, though the baby's wailing echoed through the walls, like it was mourning something none of us understood. I stood outside that door for a long while, listening to the rhythm of her footsteps back and forth, like a woman pacing the edge of something final. When I finally knocked, she didn't answer, but I heard the click of her pistol being cocked. "Don Taunt," I said gently. "I ain't come to hurt you. Just thought you might need bread or a friend." Long pause, then the door creaked open. She looked different in the lamplight, not softer. Just more worn, like she'd shed some kind of armor in the night. And all that was left was the ache underneath. "I don't need a friend," she said, but she took the bread anyway. And when the baby reached for my coat button, she let out a little laugh, the first sound of joy I'd heard from her since she arrived. "I never asked your name," I said. "You did," she said. "I just never told you the real one." Then she turned and vanished back into the room like fog curling into corners. But that night, that killing started. Clay Mercer didn't wait 3 days like he said his kind. Never do found one of the stable hands strung up from a fence post just before dawn, throat slit, tongue gone. Sheriff said it was a message. But the woman, she didn't blink, just stood on the porch with that baby cradled tight and her lips pressed to his temple, whispering. I got bold that morning, maybe too bold. I asked her straight, why would a man like Mercer say he buried the mother of your child? She looked out at the fields, then at me, because men like him think they can decide who gets to survive the story. I was quiet a long while, then I asked, and did he? She didn't answer with words, just pulled the baby's blanket down an inch enough to reveal a thin red scar across the child's chest. Looked like a bullet had come too close once. Then she said the words that stuck in my ribs like cold steel. I died once, mister, but the grave was shallow, and mercy never finished the job. And with that, she turned and walked inside. And I swear to you, the wind died down when she closed that door, like even the storm didn't want to follow her anymore. The town was on edge after that. Whispers passed from hand to hand like church wine. Who was she? Where'd the baby come from? Why'd she carry that pistol like it wasn't just for show? Some said she was a runaway whore. Others said a widow with madness behind her eyes. But I'd seen madness, and this wasn't that. This was purpose. This was vengeance in a woman's dress. And when Clay Mercer came back the second time, this time with 2 riders and a rope, well, that's when the truth started to bleed out, but not in the way any of us expected. Clay Mercer didn't ride back into Grady Hollow like a man collecting a child. He rode in like a storm rolls over the plains. Slow at first, like a warning, then fast and final. 2 men flanked him. One was a bounty killer with eyes like boiled milk. The other, well, The other was harder to name. He was young, maybe 20, maybe less, with no hat, and too many scars for someone that age. He rode like a man who didn't believe in tomorrow. Sheriff Landry stood on the steps of the jail, one hand resting on the butt of his Colt, the other steady as stone on his hip. He didn't say a word, just watched them roll in with dust on their boots, and the kind of hunger you only see in wolves that had been caged too long. Clay didn't dismount. "Where is she?" He called out. "I came for what's mine." Landry spat. "Then you'll leave empty-handed." Clay smiled. "Slow, dangerous. I've come with papers." He pulled a folded document from his coat, waved it like scripture. "Judge in Dry Hollow signed it yesterday. Says, am the boy's rightful guardian. Says the woman's got no claim." Landry didn't even glance at it. "And what's it say about the mother?" Clay's smile vanished. "It says she's dead." And right then, like it was scripted by God himself, she stepped out of Edna's boarding house. The baby swaddled tight in one arm, the gun in the other. She didn't walk like a woman surrendering. She walked like a woman who knew the ground she stood on had already tasted her blood once, and would again if it had to. "Afternoon, Clay," she said. Voice low. "Even nice of you to bring the devil with you." Clay tensed his horse, pawed the dirt. The younger man at his side fingered the hilt of his blade. "You're coming with us, Clay," said Don. "Make this harder than it needs to be." She looked at the child, kissed his cheek. Then she raised the pistol. Didn't aim it, just held it up like a warning. "You remember the last time you tried to take something from me, Clay?" she asked. He didn't answer, but I saw it then. Clear as a thunderbolt. The flicker in his eyes, not anger, fear. And the way his men looked at her, like maybe they hadn't been told the full story, like maybe they were wondering what kind of woman survives her own death, carries a gun like gospel, and dares speak to Clay Mercer like she's the one writing the ending. Then she said his name one last time, but this time like a curse. "You killed Maria. You thought no one saw." Clay barked a laugh, too loud, too sharp. "You ain't Maria. She's rotting in the hills. I saw the dirt go down myself." And then she did something ill, never forget. She stepped forward, handed the baby to Sheriff Landry, and pulled the collar of her blouse aside. 2 scars, one just above the heart, one through the side, both bullets, and still she stood. "I buried that name, Clay, buried it deep, but the earth spit me back." She raised the pistol again, this time aimed straight at his chest. "And I came back for what you stole." For one long second, none of us breathed. The sky was silent, the wind stalled, and even Clay Mercer, with all his bluster and murder, looked like a boy who just realized the monster under his bed was real and had followed him into daylight. Clay's horse shifted beneath him, like it could feel the tension crawl up its legs. That pistol in her hand, steady as a heartbeat, never wavered. "You don't want to do this," Clay said, but his voice didn't carry the same weight it had when he rode in it, cracked around the edges, now like glass stretched too thin. She stepped closer. "You put a bullet in my chest. Clay left me bleeding in a canyon ditch, with your son in my belly and your lies in my mouth." Now every man on the street knew exactly who she was. Maria, not dead, not gone. Resurrected with a vengeance so clean and quiet, it made the devil himself lean back and listen. Sheriff Landry shifted the baby on his hip, his hand resting over the child's chest like it was instinct. "You lied to a judge, Maria. Said signed your name to a paper claiming a woman was dead. Problem is, dead folks don't pull the trigger." Her finger touched the curve of that pistol's iron like it was silk, but still, she didn't shoot, not yet. The bounty killer beside Clay spoke for the first time. "Lady, I don't care who you are. You pull that trigger, there's no walking back." Maria smiled, a slow, tragic thing that didn't reach her eyes. "Who said I was walking back at all?" That's when Clay snapped. He reached quick, but not quick enough. The gunshot cracked through the square like thunder on the back of Judgment. Clay fell from the saddle, not dead, not right away, just dropped like a man whose heart had been reminded it wasn't bulletproof. His men? They hesitated. It only took Sheriff Landry one cold stare, and one whispered "don't to send them," turning tail. Maria didn't blink, didn't tremble, just walked past Clay's writhing body like she'd seen that moment play out 1,000 times in her dreams. She knelt by the sheriff, took her baby back into her arms, and whispered something in Spanish to the child. Then she looked back, down at Clay. who was coughing blood now, his shirt blooming red like a rose crushed in the dirt. "I told you," she said. Mercy never finished the job. He tried to speak, maybe beg, maybe curse her one last time. But she stood and walked away, not fast, not triumphant, just tired, like a woman who'd been carrying the weight of a coffin on her shoulders for too many miles, and had finally laid it down. Folks say revenge doesn't heal anything. Maybe they're right. But some wounds, they don't want healing, they just want someone else to bleed too. And that day in Grady Hollow, the woman with no name finally got hers back. Maria, mother survivor ghost, with a heartbeat. And as she disappeared down the southern road, baby in her arms, gun at her hip, I knew we wouldn't see her again. But Lord help the next man who tried to claim something that wasn't his. She left town without a word. No goodbyes, no promises, just silence. Thick and heavy like fog before a storm, but the story didn't end there. See, 3 nights after she vanished from Grady Hollow, a rider came tearing down from the north face, pale shirt soaked in blood that wasn't his. Said had seen her at a burned-out chapel near Twin Rocks. Said the bounty man who'd ridden with Clay was lying in the dirt, shot through the eye knife in his gut. Said Maria had left him breathing just long enough to whisper one thing before he died: "She's not running, she's hunting." And that's when it all started to make sense. She hadn't just come back to reclaim a child. No, that was only part of it. The rest? Revenge, not just for herself, but for every woman who'd been silenced, buried, branded, or beaten by the kind of men who thought the West was theirs alone. Maria was following a trail, a quiet one, marked by the sins of Clay Mercer and the men who rode with him. A trail of bodies and betrayals, stretching from dry canyons to brothel backrooms, to unmarked graves. She was digging them up one by one by one. Every man who'd helped Clay fake her death, everyone who'd held her down or turned away, or swore she wouldn't survive, they were on her list. We started hearing stories in nearby towns, a man poisoned in his sleep, with laudanum and rose petals left on his chest. Another one found strung up by his own suspenders behind the saloon he used to frequent. Boots missing, teeth broken, each one connected to Clay somehow. And always the same rumor followed: a woman with a baby wrapped in blue wool, gun on her hip, moving like smoke in the wind. Some said she was a ghost. Others said she'd sold her soul to the devil himself, to come back and finish what death wouldn't. But me, I knew the truth. Maria wasn't haunting the West, she was cleaning IT. And somewhere along the way, people stopped asking who the baby belonged to, because by then, it was clear. That child was the only part of her life she hadn't given up to the fire, the one thing she'd carried through blood and loss and ash without letting go. Her reason, her anchor, her future. But even with the child in her arms, she was never soft, never safe. She'd smile at a stranger, warm and sweet, and if his hand moved wrong, her pistol would move faster. There were whispers she stayed a few days in a quiet village beyond Snake Ridge, helped a woman deliver twins in a thunderstorm, then vanished. Said she left behind a silver necklace, a child, spoot, and a message scrawled in charcoal on the wall. A woman who survives the grave doesn't ask for forgiveness, she asks for silence. That silence followed her like a shroud, somewhere along the edge of the horizon. Past where maps gave up and lawmen stopped writing, she kept going. If you listen close some nights when the wind cuts sharp and cold, you'll hear it. A lullaby in Spanish, a whisper of a name, and the click of a gun waiting. Weeks passed, then months, and just when folks in Grady Hollow started to forget the sound of her boots and the smell of gun oil in the rain, she came back. Not like before. This time she didn't ride in during the dawn hush or the drama of a showdown. She walked in on foot just after sundown, carrying the baby close and a satchel slung over one shoulder like it was full of thunder. Her face was thinner, eyes darker, the kind of dark that it ain't about color. It's about memory, about what you've seen, about what you had to do to make it out. Behind her, a trail of wind that carried no scent, no sound. Just the strange feeling that something heavy had finally been set down. She didn't speak to no one, just walked right up to Sheriff Landry, door knocked once and waited. He answered in his long johns, one hand already near the old hunting rifle he never really needed. When he saw her, his breath caught. "Lord help me," he muttered. "I thought you were gone for good." She looked up at him with a quiet kind of grief. "I was, but I ain't done yet." Then she handed him the satchel inside. 3 revolvers, a list of names. 1 badge torn in half, and a single photograph of a woman tied to a post. Eyes swollen but still proud. Landry didn't need to ask questions. Did Teeny too? He poured her a drink, gave her the spare room, set the baby in the crib that had sat empty since his daughter left home. As the town slept, she sat on his porch, watching the moon trace slow across the sky. Didn't he rock the baby, didn't Town Hum just sat like a woman waiting for the next thing to crawl up out of hell and knock. Next morning, a rider from Bitter Hill showed up. Panicked, sweaty, said there been a fire in the old Mayan tunnels outside town. Said someone found a dozen bodies inside, laid out in a circle with stones over their chests and eyes closed like they'd gone willingly. Landry didn't. T. Flinch just looked toward the boarding house and nodded once. We all knew she'd done it, not for vengeance anymore, but for silence, for peace, for the baby. Later that week, I found her in the mercantile, standing over the jar of molasses like it held some old secret. She didn't speak when I walked up, I didn't. Teddy, there's sometimes the best thing you can give someone like her is space and time. But when she turned, there was something new in her eyes, not joy, not sorrow, either, just stillness. Thinking of staying, she said. I raised my brow, really. She looked down at the baby, chubby now, smiling, and nodded. He needs a home, and I'm tired of running. Running from what? She stared out the window, then said real quiet, the woman I used to be. That was the last conversation I had with her. A week later, she bought the abandoned ranch house out past Willow Creek, moved in with the baby, planted tomatoes, fed the stray dog. No more gun at her hip. No more shadows behind her eyes. Just wind dust, and something almost like peace. Almost. Because when night came and the coyotes sang low, she still kept that pistol loaded beside her bed. Some ghosts don't knock. Some walk right in. And the kind of woman who's crawled out of a grave don't sleep easy. Spring crept into Grady Hollow, slow and stubborn, like an old man rising from bed. Wildflowers broke through the frost, the creek finally unfroze enough to reflect the clouds. And Maria, she started to smile again. Not often, not big, but enough. Enough that the town began to look at her different. Less like a ghost, more like a neighbor. Folks whispered, of course, always will, but the whispers softened. She'd ride into town once a week. Baby swaddled snug in her arms, wearing a sun hat, now instead of a pistol. What milk beans, occasionally a book with no pictures, just pages. She'd turn real slow while the boy slept curled against her ribs like a secret. She'd finally decided to keep. But peace in places like ours is a borrowed thing. It don't belong to anyone for long. It was the 3rd Tuesday of April when a stranger walked into town. Not a gunslinger, not a lawman. Worse, he was clean-shaven, wore black, and had the kind of stillness in his shoulders that said had seen men die, and never once raised his voice about it. No one knew his name, but he didn't ask for a drink, didn't ask for a room. He asked one question at the bar of the Rusted Spur. Where's the woman with the baby? Sheriff Landry was there. He didn't stand, didn't need to. Why you looking? He asked. The man smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Someone's owed, not me, but someone. Landry leaned back, tapped ash from his cigar, and said then, maybe that someone should ride here himself. The stranger just turned and walked out, but not before saying 2 words that iced the blood of every man within earshot. She's marked. Maria heard about it within the hour. Didn't run. Didn't pack. She put the baby down for a nap. Brewed coffee. Sat on the porch with her old revolver resting across her lap. Not out of fear, just respect. Some debts don't die. Some names once spoke an echo. And in her past, there were names worse than Clay Mercer. Men who didn't care about justice, only legacy. Men who believed a woman like Maria, shot, buried, left to rot, was never supposed to rise. But she had. And now they wanted her erased proper. That night I rode out to her ranch. Brought her a new hammer for the chicken coop and a bottle of peach brandy I'd been saving since my wedding got called off. She poured 2 glasses. Didn't say much. Just watched the moon rise while the baby slept sound. And safe behind the walls shed built in. Then she said something I've never forgotten. They'll come. She whispered, they always do. I asked, you scared? She looked down at her hands, the same hands that once clawed through earth to escape a shallow grave. And she said, no, just tired. But tired done mean done. And as the night crept on, and the wolves kept their distance, Maria cleaned her gun one last time, the same way a woman might iron her dress for Sunday service. Not for fear, but for ritual, because some things you don't leave to chance, especially not when men who live in shadows decide they want to bury you again. They came at dawn, 3 riders cloaked in dust and silence. No flags, no introductions, just death dressed polite. One wore preacher's black, though his eyes were hollow. One wore cavalry blue, with no rank on his chest. The last wore no color at all, just gray like bone turned to ash. They didn't stop in town, didn't ask for directions. They rode straight through Grady Hollow, like they'd followed her scent across 1,000 miles. Straight to the ranch, straight to Maria. She was waiting for them, the baby already handed off to Miss Edna, who came before first light and took him in without question. Maria stood in the dirt yard, shotgun at her feet, hands loose, heart. Still she didn't speak, didn't need to. The men dismounted, slow, reverent, even like this was a funeral and she was the last to be laid down. The man in gray stepped forward. You've cost powerful men a great deal, Maria. She raised her chin. Powerful men should think twice before trying to kill a woman who knows how to crawl back. He nodded. We agree. That's why we've come to finish it properly. She smirked. You think proper's gonna change the end? He drew no weapon, not yet, just took a step closer. You were warned, Mark Clay. Mer's just the first, the others will keep coming. I'm counting on it, she said then. She kicked the shotgun up with her boot, fired once. The man in blue never made it past the porch rail, dropped like a sack of wet grain. Chaos cracked in the morning. The preacher-looking one drew his iron fast, too fast. But Maria had already dropped the shotgun and rolled behind the trough pistol, now in hand, eyes hard and bright. 2 more shots, one missed one. Didn't the preacher spun, clutched his throat, and fell gasping prayers. No God was listening too. Only the man in gray remained. He hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, just looked down at the blood in the dirt like it bored him. You could have had peace, he said. Maria stepped out from behind the trough chest, rising slow. I had peace, she answered. Then men like you mistook my silence for surrender. The man in gray drew his weapon. Maria didn't flinch. He fired. And that's when Sheriff Landry's bullet hit him clean through the back of the skull. Gray dropped without so much as a gasp. Maria turned to Landry, holstered his revolver like it was routine. You always wait this long? She asked. He shrugged, had to be sure you wanted help. She laughed, just once, short and dry, but it was real. I did, she said, for the boy's sake. He nodded. Then let's go get him. And so she did. No more running, no more blood. She took her baby back from Edna's arms, kissed his hair, and held him, like maybe for the first time she believed she could keep him safe. No more ghosts, just scars, and a town that finally realized the woman they feared wasn't a curse, she was a warning. And she'd already survived the grave once. Next time she'd bury it herself. Summer turned the edges of Grady Hollow golden wheat, waved in the breeze, dust curled off the trails like smoke from old memories. And Maria stayed. She didn't hide, didn't draw attention either. She took up work at the livery stable, fixing saddles, tending to horses, earning coins and trust. The baby named Thomas, now short for something older and full of loss, grew like prairie grass in spring, strong, sweet, sharp-eyed. She taught him the same way. She lived quiet, careful, but never afraid. I saw her one evening at the edge of town, leaning on the fence rail with Thomas on her hip. She was humming, just soft enough for the wind to keep it a secret. You look different, I said. She looked over her shoulder, eyes soft now, but still dangerous. I feel different. Safe? I asked. She thought for a long moment. No, but not hunted either. And that should have been enough. Should have been the ending. But endings don't always come wrapped in ribbon. Sometimes they come with dust on their boots and poison in their mouth. It was the preacher's brother who came next. Rode into town alone. Older, meaner, a man who believed in fire more than forgiveness. He didn't wear black like his kin. He wore white. White coat, white gloves, like a vulture dressed for Sunday. Said his name was Alton Grice. Didn't ask for Maria. Didn't even speak her name. He just stood in the churchyard, arms folded, and said to no one in particular, "She's not forgiven, not by me, not by the order." That word carried weight, ancient, even like some old club for men who whispered judgments in candlelight, and called it justice. Sheriff Landry walked out onto the steps, hand loose on his revolver. "Don't know what you came to find," he said, "but we're fresh out of ghosts here." Alton smiled without warmth. "I didn't come for her, I came for the boy." That's when Maria stepped forward. Thomas clutched to her hip, and every eye in Grady Hollow turned toward her like they knew the final page had begun to turn. Maria didn't flinch, didn't shift. The boy didn't reach for the pistol. She still kept strapped to her thigh under her skirt. She just looked at Alton Grice the way thunder looks at a dry tree. "You don't want the boy," she said. "You want to erase what he proves." Alton stepped forward, slow, careful. "You think you've done something noble," he said, "killing men, escaping your death, raising a child that shouldn't be breathing." She kissed Thomas' temple, slow and sure. "This child was born of violence," she said, "but hell be raised in peace or you'll die trying to stop it." He chuckled. Not the kind of laugh that comes from joy, but from power too long unchecked. "You forget who you're speaking to, Maria. We own men like Mercer. We fund judges and control Inc. You're not a woman to them. You're a loose thread, and loose threads get pulled." Then his voice dropped low. "You think you've done damage. You haven't seen what happens when the order feels cornered." Sheriff Landry stepped forward, rifle now in both hands. No words, just that look. Old weathered final. Maria handed Tomas to Edna, who took him without a word, and backed toward the saloon doors, shielding him like he was gold in a storm. And Maria? She stepped into the churchyard, face to face with Alton Grice. "Men like you," she said, "think legacy is something you build with fire and silence." He grinned. She shook her head. "Legacy is what's left when you stop killing." She drew. He drew. But Maria was faster. Again. Just like always. Her bullet hit his shoulder, spun him sideways. His gun clattered useless to the ground. And before he could curse, before he could shout to whatever shadows he served, Maria was on him. Not with violence. With truth. She grabbed him by the collar and hissed through her teeth. "You tell your brothers. I'm done burying you one at a time." She let him fall. Didn't kill him. Didn't need to. I'd carry the message better if he limped. Landry looked at her, eyes wide. "You just made war with men who don't lose." Maria walked past him, voice calm. "I don't care if they lose." She took Thomas back in her arms, eyes never leaving the rising dust where Alton Grice's horse had vanished. "I care that he remembers." But something had changed that day. Not just in her and us. Because for the first time, Grady Hollow didn't see Maria as a story or a survivor. We saw her as a shield, and we knew the storm wasn't done. Not yet. They came at night. Not 3, not 4, 7 riders, all in black. No lanterns, no banners, just silence and the smell of blood riding ahead of them like smoke on wind. No law followed them, no mercy behind them. Just the cold hands of a brotherhood that believed themselves to be gods in human skin. The order, and Maria? She didn't hide. She dressed slow, tied her hair back, pressed her lips to Thomas' forehead, left him sleeping in the cellar beneath the floorboards with Edna and the old revolver tucked beside the crib. Then she stepped outside barefoot, calm, beautiful, in the way wildfire is beautiful before it swallows a mountain. She stood in the yard, like Shed stood there her whole life, like she owned the dirt under her toes and the stars above her head. And when the first rider raised his gun, she didn't duck. She whispered one word now. And Grady Hollow lit up like Judgment Day. Sheriff Landry fired from the roof of the saloon. Jonas the blacksmith pulled a sawed-off from under a barrel and dropped 2 before they even touched their reins. The schoolteacher, Miss June, cut one clean through the gut with a rifle she hadn't used since the war. See, Maria hadn't just prepared herself. Shed prepared us, taught us, warned us, strengthened us with silence. And when the order came, we were no longer a town watching from porches. We were her army. The fight didn't last long, but the blood did. 3 riders burned in the barn when Maria set fire to the hayloft with kerosene and matchstick. 2 more lay dead in the road. 1 ran and was never seen again. The last, an old man with silver hair and more rings than fingers, crawled through the mud whispering prayers. Maria stood over him. He said, "This is bigger than you." She said, "Good. Then it'll take longer to burn," and shot him once between the eyes. By morning, nothing remained of the order in Grady Hollow but ashes and bones. Maria didn't stay to gloat. She stayed long enough to hold her son, to drink black coffee with Landry, to sit by the river with her bare feet in the water and her heart in her chest again. And then one day, she left behind the ranch, left behind the pistol, left Tomas with Edna and a sealed letter. The letter only had one sentence: "Tell him I loved him before I ever held him." Some say she's still alive, riding the edges of the country, helping women disappear from bad men. Some say she walks alone with a scarred hand and eyes that stop bullets. But I know the truth. Maria never left, because every time a woman stands her ground, every time a mother lifts her child and says, "Not this one," every time someone refuses to be erased, Maria's story lives again, not in fear but in fire.